This is CBC Here and Now.
For now, schools like this one will stay empty as virtual classes continue next week. That's just ahead.
A deadly avian flu that's already killed many birds in the St. John's area is being monitored by federal officials.
This virus has killed tens, possibly hundreds of thousands of wild birds in Europe and Asia and Africa.
I'll have more coming up on Here and Now.
The first nor'easter of 2022 is headed our way as we head through Friday night into Saturday. Expect some significant snow with this one.
Welcome to Here and Now. I'm Carolyn Stokes. Well, the number of people in hospital continues to climb, but it's still much lower than other provinces. And the Premier says this province is well positioned to continue that trend. Here Now's Peter Cowan joins us now with all the latest COVID info. So, Peter, what changes are we seeing today?
Carolyn, there's an additional person in hospital tonight as we now take a look at that, one of the key indicators we have in terms of how the province is progressing with COVID-19. Right now, there are a total of 4 people in hospital. One of those is in the Labrador-Grenfell Health region. The other 3 are in the Eastern region. 503 cases were reported today, and there are now more than 4,000 known active cases. About 12% of the tests are coming back positive. That's similar numbers to what we've seen in the last few days. Now, if you want to look at that 4 people in hospital, it is much lower than we've seen in other Atlantic provinces. For example, Nova Scotia has 48 people in hospital. New Brunswick has 63 right now. But will our numbers stay lower? The Premier thinks we are in a better position here to not strain the healthcare system.
To date, we've seen lower rates in Newfoundland and Labrador, and frankly, that little bit of lag time, as you suggested, a couple of weeks, has allowed us to roll out a healthier booster campaign. It's allowed us to put in more targeted, balanced public health measures along the way, incremental, adding to them as we need to. And I think the combination of those two things will hopefully put us in a good place. But we are always reevaluating this. We're always looking at the measures to see if they work and to see if there's anything else we need to do to protect the hospital capacity.
So what does the end game look like as this province tries to move beyond COVID-19? More of my feature conversation with Premier Andrew Furey is coming up. We'll touch on that topic and lots more to talk about when it comes to COVID. It's coming up on Here and Now.
Thanks, Peter. That's Here and Now's Peter Cowan reporting live. Well, a major COVID-19 testing facility closed unexpectedly in Corner Brook today. This testing site, located in the studio portion of the city's Civic Center, had to shut down. City staff says there was a leak near an electrical panel and the entire building had to close so electricians could turn off power and safely assess the damage. This parking lot at the walk-in site is usually filled with people waiting for a test. Western Health says it's developing a plan to have a testing site available tomorrow. Well, as case counts soar, union leaders representing most healthcare workers in this province have a united message. The system is buckling and workers are lost to isolation. Here Now's Terry Roberts has this update.
The situation right now is critical, and that's the only word I can describe it as critical.
I don't think it's ever been as serious. We're not at a point where our healthcare system certainly can't function, but we're at a point where we have to protect our healthcare system.
It's holding up right now because people are stepping up from all different areas.
Collectively, they speak for thousands of healthcare workers in this province. The latest setback, an estimated 1,000 are in self-isolation, having either tested positive for the highly transmissible Omicron variant or was a close contact of someone who has.
So when you take 1,000 out of a system that was already stressed before this pandemic, you can imagine the impact. And we anticipate, us collectively when we talk about that, this number is likely going to increase.
It's forced health managers to scramble, redeploying staff in order to keep up with the demand for testing and vaccinations, working long hours, sometimes in harsh winter conditions. In some cases, public workers from other departments are pitching in.
We have staff being deployed to units where we have a significant number of staff home isolating.
Right now, that's a good thing for us, is helping out our long-term care facilities for sure. So let's hope that we can keep all these staff that are redeployed safe right now.
And in hard-hit Labrador, healthcare workers from other regions of the Big Land are being redeployed to places like Happy Valley, Goose Bay. In some cases, those reassignments are mandated, but
most members are stepping up and volunteering to go elsewhere to help out and to do what they can in this situation.
the biggest fear, safety of the most vulnerable. Omicron is turning up in long-term care facilities, including the Bay St. George Long-Term Care Centre in Stephenville Crossing.
There's no doubt there are people that are doing the care that are very tired physically and mentally as well, but the residents are being cared for and the patients in acute care are being cared for at this point.
So what can be done? Labour leaders say follow public health guidelines, show patience and understanding.
Government has been doing its due diligence when it comes to vaccines for healthcare workers, and we're slowly getting there. And I encourage everybody out there to please get vaccinated if you're able to.
We're going to have to accept that some elective things are not going to be available. We are truly at a point where our healthcare system has to be protected, and we all have a responsibility in doing that.
There is immense pressure on the system, and we need the public to help us.
These Labour leaders also want improved recruitment and retention of healthcare workers, though that's a longer-term solution. Terry Roberts, CBC News, St. John's.
Students will not be going back to class next week. The Department of Education announced today that online learning will continue for another week. Enrica Wilhelm reports.
Another week of online learning, but the Department of Education is trying to put plans in place to get back to class. One step in the return will be rapid tests for both students and teachers.
Over the next 3 or 4 days, these kits should be delivered throughout the province. Those logistics are now being worked out with the NLESD, who will get them out to the schools and to the different regions of the province. And once they're put in place, at some point next week, we'll be able to provide greater detail.
The NLTA supports rapid tests coming to schools. It also supports the decision of another week of online learning. In a statement released this afternoon, it says, "This is the most prudent decision given the unprecedented number of COVID-19 cases in the province. The school system is not ready operationally to resume in-person learning at this time. There are teacher recruitment challenges, including a serious shortage of substitute teachers in many areas." The decision isn't welcomed by some parents, though.
There should never be a situation where people are dining in restaurants, where my child can work at the mall, but he can't go to school. And again, this is exactly what's happening here in Newfoundland. Schools should be the last things to close. If restaurants are still open, schools should be open.
Dalton criticizes the level of education she feels her son, a grade 12 student, is getting in online classes.
He's basically missed whole semesters of courses. So what ends up happening is that when he moves on to the next level of the course and he's expected to know the previous one, he's having to work extremely hard to kind of do the two courses at once. And the marks are substantially lower because of that. The other problem is that there has been no final exams at all in all of high school for him. So he's going to go to university next year, and he's never written a final exam.
The past year in this province, we've had very little loss of in-class instruction time, and with online learning, we've had less loss instruction time of other provinces across Canada.
Other than rapid tests, what about N95 masks? They're not on Osborne's list for now. He also hopes there's no need to re-examine the way school is delivered in the province, as he says his first priority is to get students back to school as soon as possible. Henrike Wilhelm, CBC News, St. John's.
heavy rain and mild temperatures on the west coast shut down a main road, closing off 2 communities. This section of Route 450 started to flood mid-morning today. The stretch of highway on the south shore of the Bay of Islands is closed until further notice, cutting off anyone living in York Harbor and Lark Harbor. Community leaders have asked people to avoid the area for now. Crews with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure are on the scene, but the road is expected to stay closed for some time. And north of that washout, more flooding in Trout River. Wade Barnes woke up to knee-deep water surrounding his house and shed. The community in Grossmore National Park saw heavy flooding today due to the mild temperatures and melting snow overnight. Barnes says his basement is also full of water, and he hopes the freezing temperatures tonight won't make matters worse.
Well, pretty much all of the island did see some of those warmer temperatures along with rain earlier today, except for the northern peninsula, where roads are currently still snow covered. And the reason for that is an area of low pressure. Let's take a look at that. We're seeing that area of low pressure track further east. If I zoom in a little bit, you can see the clearing skies in behind that, but the heaviest rain now affecting eastern Newfoundland, and we should see that end over the next couple of hours. The other thing with this one is the strong winds. Now I'm having a little bit of trouble with the wind amounts there, but you can see 72 kilometers per hour in Bonavista Vista earlier today, and those winds are gusting upwards of 90, and as we head through the night tonight, we're going to see those winds eventually die off, and then the snow will end for the northern peninsula as well. We are watching the next system roll through, though, for tomorrow night into Saturday. I'll get into those details when I come back.
Well, Quebec is down nearly 20,000 healthcare workers. They're all isolating as a result of COVID. Soon, that province will expand its vaccination passport to include more non-essential businesses. Users will also have to show proof of a 3rd dose.
It's only a start. The only reason we applied this one only is because that's the one we control. Those are two societies that we control. And we're sending a clear message. This will not be the last 2. We are in communication in the coming days with all non-essential service, shopping malls, name it. The message I'm sending to non-vaccinated people, if you don't get vaccinated, stay home.
And Quebec is expecting to see a huge jump in hospitalizations this month. The prediction, more than 3,000 people will be in hospital in 2 weeks' time. Well, like Newfoundland and Labrador, there are also 4 people in hospital in Prince Edward Island due to COVID-19. Today, PEI's top doctor spoke about the importance of well-fitted masks, saying it's also important to wear the right mask. Here's why Dr. Heather Morrison says N95s are best left to healthcare professionals.
The N95 mask can be fitted really well for healthcare workers, and then they usually often will wear a eye protection with it, and because they're looking after people who may be coughing on them and up close and looking after them, so they need the best protection possible, but if you're walking quickly through Sobeys or down the hall, you may not need that same level of protection.
Morrison says there should be fewer people in indoor spaces, and you should still maintain distance when taking off your mask to eat. She says these things, together with masking, offer added layers of protection against the virus. Well, now to another kind of virus that's causing problems. A St. John's farm is partly under quarantine after being hit with a type of avian influenza. It's deadly to birds and has been known to harm humans. There's concern that chickens, ducks, and geese got infected by wild birds that aren't native to Newfoundland and Labrador. Here now's Mark Quinn has that story.
It's here at Mundy Pond that federal officials say they found a blackback gull in late November that tested positive for avian flu. And a month later, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency confirmed it found many cases of the deadly flu on a farm in St. John's. More than 350 birds died and another 60 were culled.
It was an emotional disappointment, but I'd also like to say how devastating it was to our staff who had kind of developed relationships with these birds, and to our customers who, used to come to visit a specific animal.
Lester lost chickens, ducks, geese, peacocks, and even an emu that once lived here, birds that weren't for sale. Right now, his barn is quarantined, and federal officials have put a 10-kilometer surveillance zone around it.
I would like to be super optimistic and say that this is going to be the first and only incidence of avian influenza in an agricultural setting. But this is a virus that's currently in over 40 countries and wrapping itself around the world. So, this is, I guess, part of the new world we live in. And not only does it affect the way we live, it's going to affect the way we produce food.
Federal officials say the virus on the farm lines up genetically with the Eurasian lineage of high-path H5N1 that's been circulating in wild birds in Europe and Asia this year.
If it gets off the island, if it's not already, and into the wild bird populations on the mainland of North America, there's no reason, based on what's happened in Europe, for us not to expect that many thousands and thousands of birds could be killed.
Some blame climate change for bringing birds like this European pink-footed goose to Newfoundland. And typically, local birds don't have immunity against diseases these birds from elsewhere can carry.
Yes, actually, more possibility we're going to see birds migration increasing. Then it will increase the possibility to be in contact with a diverse strain of influenza virus.
It's tragic for birds, but the avian flu, which has caused severe illness and even death in some people, also poses a risk to human health.
But of course, if we have a strain that is able to adapt to human, then it could be also quite pathogenic in humans.
The city of St. John's is trying to help prevent the spread of the virus. While federal officials continue to test birds for disease, the city's asking residents to stop feeding and handling wild birds at Bowring Park, Kitty Lake, and other areas where large flocks gather. Mark Quinn, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, today is Old Christmas Day, the day many people traditionally take down their trees. But before we say goodbye to the holidays, we want to show you one very unusual Christmas tree. You could call it the bee tree, an elaborately handcrafted work of art that pays tribute to one of my personal favorite creatures, the honeybee. This tree was created by artist Brent Coffin, who spent the past 9 months designing and crafting those intricate ornaments, and Brent joins me now from Gander. So Brent, what an amazing creation. What kind of work did you put into making this?
Thank you. Well, actually, before the 9 months even, I had created the initial angel on top, and that took a few months alone because her dress took so much time to create with the honeycombs. And then I could create little honeybees out of latex and hot glue from molds that I made with clay, and then have those on the inside and sort of buzzing around her and, bejewel it all and do the corsetry. So it started off as a smaller project in that sense, but I think with COVID and the sort of sense of isolation and needing more hands-on techniques that involve every type of messy and even poisonous thing that I could think of, that kind of got me away from the more traditional things that I was doing, like drawing or painting, that I was more used to. It ballooned from there, mushroomed, and I remembered seeing actually your story on the beekeeping and the pink beekeepers, and I thought that was so fun. So it started from there, and I've always loved the form of bees, and I really wanted to do a little homage to the honeybees because I feel that they are becoming endangered and they're so vital to our survival. And I think that survival has been on everyone's minds over the last year, and perhaps that's what led me to the idea of the bees. Something that's so small and yet so strong and vital.
And what about all the little ornaments on the tree? There's so much detail to it. You created the ornaments and everything?
Yes. Yeah. Actually, the only thing that I didn't was the little orange light toppers, but everything else, right down to the base, the angel, everything is all created by me. And I wanted it to be, I suppose, as like purist an idea as possible, where I got into every little nitty-gritty detail. And I've always been inspired by like haute couture, which led to like the corset making for the angel, and it even laces up on the back. And I got really tickled and obsessed.
You were into it.
It's almost sad. I thought, oh my God, I'm becoming too introverted. And I even had to tighten up the eyelets and with tweezers to lace it up. So I used everything from resin. If I could show you one.
Yeah.
I created an iris. Actually, I have 3 of these.
Wow.
And these are actually made out of, they started out as a flat sheet of plexiglass. But I figured out from watching different couture videos that you could melt plexiglass soft enough to cut with scissors with a heat gun. So I created the petal shapes. And then once I had the flat shapes made, I made the striations and detailing with a soldering iron. And then once that all dried and I shaped it, I dipped it all in turpentine and then did like watercolor technique with bleeding the colors through it. So it has a stained glass effect. And that was one of my proudest moments, I think, with it, because it was so different from anything I'd worked with. And then I went back to sort of more safer items, and I created a bee that is entirely made of little tube or bugle beads, they're called.
That's fantastic. No wonder this took you 9 months. That's really intricate.
My husband was wondering where's Brent, and then I'd be up in the studio doing God knows what, and it looked like a bomb had gone off in the studio. What I discovered with a lot of the ideas, and it's kind of, I guess, a nice metaphor for the times, with seeing how light plays through a lot of the ornaments that I created. And then, for instance, that big ribbon that I made that's in the center of the tree, I positioned the lights in the tree behind it mostly so that you could see almost like the x-ray image of the bees on it and the coloration from behind. And you even get to see the yellow and oranges that were the underlayers of the paint. So it was a nice little metaphor in terms of working and then seeing the unexpected light coming through.
So much creativity and attention to detail. I already have a few honeybee ornaments on my own Christmas tree at home, but after seeing this, I just might have to get more next year. Brent Coffin, thank you so much for sharing this story.
Thank you.
We're going to see a little bit of a break in the winds through the day tomorrow, but they're really going to ramp up Friday night and continue through the day on Saturday. With that, lots of snow for parts of the island. I'll break the full forecast down for you coming up.
This weather update is brought to you by the NL 511 app. Know before you go. Check road conditions, highway cameras, and the provincial plow tracker with the NL 511 app.
Ashley's here now with a look at the weather forecast, and we were talking about some flooding on the west coast earlier in the show. A very mild, wet day today in St. John's.
Yeah, it's definitely been a roller coaster as far as temperatures go, pretty much across the island, really. Let's take a look at those temperatures this afternoon. Reached temperatures in the high single digits, 8 degrees in Bonavista today, 7 in St. John's. And the top spot was actually Marystown, where you saw a high near 9 degrees, but much different story as you head towards the northern peninsula with those highs in the minus single digits. That is where we saw all that snow today. And then bone chilling cold in Labrador, minus 23 in Happy Valley, Goose Bay this afternoon. Now taking a look at satellite radar, we can see that rain is now in eastern Newfoundland, and it's going to move through over the next couple of hours and then end as we head through the overnight. We do still have wind warnings in place though, and winter storm warning as well as a snowfall warning in place for the northern peninsula. Now those other winter storm warnings are out ahead of our next system that will move in Friday night through Saturday. We'll talk about that in just a little bit, but those extreme cold warnings still in place for Lab West and Churchill Falls as well as the Valley, where you're going to see those temperatures cold, bone chilling cold again tonight, minus 36 in Lab City, minus 23 in Happy Valley, Goose Bay. Know what happens to those temperatures across the island as well. We went from 8 to 9 degrees today down to minus 8 in Corner Brook as your overnight low tonight, and minus 5 in St. John. So it will likely get very slippery out there. All this rain will quickly change to ice. Now I just wanted to show you the wind chill outlook. You can see the reason for that extreme cold warning in Lab West is the wind chill. Still looking at those wind chills in and around the minus 40s. And then look what happens across the island as well. Temperatures dip down, like I said, to the minus single digits with those wind chills feeling more like minus 14 or minus 15, and then even colder as you head further east tomorrow morning. By the time you step out the door, going to feel more like minus 12 in St. John. So definitely a very different story than today. And here's a look at your forecast for tomorrow. As far as temperatures go, it'll be much colder than it was today. Again, minus 2 to minus 5 as the daytime highs. And the first half of the day is actually going to start out pretty nice with some sunshine, and then we'll see that system roll through. I'll get into those details, but it is going to be sunny for Labrador, another nice day, but cold, minus 24 in Lab City. So we'll just time that out. Here's the system moving in late day. So by late afternoon, early evening, most areas should be seeing that snow, and the winds are going to ramp up, especially along the south coast. You can see Port aux Basques, Burgeo already seeing winds gusting anywhere from 80 to 90 kilometers per hour. Now the track of this low looks like it'll be across eastern Newfoundland. So anything to the east of that will fall or transition through to potentially ice pellets and even rain through the overnight. Now depending on the track, we'll see where that ends up, but at this point that's what it's looking like, and the winds will be gusting somewhere between 50 to 70 kilometers per hour. Now as we head through the day on Saturday, that area of low pressure continues to intensify. Heavy snow through most of the afternoon for central and points westward, including the northern peninsula again, and you can see those winds gusting anywhere from 80 to even 100 kilometers per hour. And then look what happens in the afternoon. We start to see those gusts about 100 to 120 kilometers per hour. So likely going to see blowing snow, potentially even some blizzard conditions through the afternoon. But by the time Saturday evening rolls around, that will end, the snow will end, and the looks like the winds will come down along with it. So this is the first crack at the snowfall forecast, looking like a good 20 to 30 centimeters, but in and around Bonavista North is where it looks like the bullseye of the highest snow will be. We could see about 30 to 40 centimeters with this one. So that's a look at the forecast, at least an early look at the forecast. We'll look ahead when I come back.
COVID has quickly become the big story of 2022. How does this pandemic end?
And I think, you know, the quarantine for new entrants to our province is something that we need to reevaluate in the weeks and months ahead.
My feature conversation with the Premier is coming up. Well, 2022 isn't starting off the way I think any of us expected or wanted. COVID has once again become one of the main issues facing our province. And so to start the year off, we wanted to bring in the man leading the province. Premier Andrew Furey is here for a look ahead at what we're going to be facing in 2022, not just with COVID, but with some of the other challenges as well. Premier, thanks for joining me.
No problem, Peter. Happy New Year to you.
Is it a Happy New Year?
I think it is a Happy New Year. I know it's a dark day today in the last couple of weeks, but there's a great reason for optimism and hope in Newfoundland and Labrador in 2022. Can't forget we're in a much different position than we were in 2021.
What was the moment that you realized that our strategy of trying to keep COVID out and prevent people from getting it wasn't going to be practical and we needed to pivot?
I think when you started to see the numbers and frankly the epidemiology, the doubling time, the infectious rate, and the contagious ability of Omicron occur not just in South Africa but in Denmark and then the United Kingdom, it seemed to be that these were different jurisdictions with different approaches, and frankly the most frightening thing to me from an Omicron perspective was that doubling time and therefore its ability to transmit. And I think once you saw that, you knew that, and you saw it in different jurisdictions, so it wasn't that one jurisdiction did something different than the other, that you knew that this was truly something different than the previous variants that we'd been unlucky enough to see.
If we had moved earlier though, and we'd locked down before we started having people coming home for Christmas, before we saw people infected coming into the province, wasn't there a world under which we could have done what we've done for basically the last 2 years, bring in quarantine measures and keep the virus out?
I'm not really sure that applies to this particular variant, given how transmissible it is. Because as soon as we started to open up, then we would eventually see this variant. That's how transmissible this is. And as we've seen, a lot of people with it don't have symptoms, so it's difficult to screen. And of course, there's the balance of the economy and keeping the economy open as best we can during these challenging times. So it's not as simple as just weighing one against the other 2 years into this. We need to make sure that we have a balance and a measure when we're approaching this variant. And a frank shutdown or lockdown in early December wasn't what Dr. Fitzgerald was recommending, and frankly, I agree with that. We've learned in the past that incremental approaches to this can also have desired effects, and we're seeing some of the results of that in some of the measures that we took before Christmas. Some of the difficult decisions that Dr. Fitzgerald brought forward before Christmas have now shown some impact in terms of the numbers and the extension of the doubling time.
Did we wait too long, though, to bring in that quarantine requirement? Because even delaying it 2 days meant there were more people who arrived who were sick, who didn't have to quarantine, and who were then able to spread it.
I don't think so, because if you look at so we're well 2 weeks past that time frame right now, and if we're looking at hospitalizations, there's no one in hospital because of those 2 weeks. So, I think that you have to make a decision at some point in time, and I think that decision was brought forward by Dr. Fitzgerald at the right time with the right balance and the right measure. You can't forget back then there was very little Omicron here in the province, and once we started detected it and to see where this would be going, that's when the decision was made. So I think the decision made by Dr. Fitzgerald and her team was the right one at the right time.
Other provinces aren't requiring any quarantine measures, even ones that have during the rest of the pandemic. With the fact that we've now accepted that it is going to be here and we're just kind of controlling it and living with it, has that quarantine sort of outlived its usefulness?
Well, look, I think one thing we've shown here in Newfoundland and Labrador is that we look at the evidence, we make decisions, but we also know that evidence is evolving. And what's true today may have evolved to be a new truth 2 weeks from now. So, and that's based on evidence. That's based on how this disease is evolving, how the virus is evolving, how the epidemiology is evolving. So I think one thing is for certain, in 10, 20 years from now, when people look back at this time, they will judge us by our ability to be dynamic. And I think we've proven that. We don't dig in, we pivot when we need to, we're adaptable. And I think, the quarantine for new entrants to our province is something that we need to reevaluate in the weeks and months ahead.
We know that with the strategy of, allowing the virus to spread, hopefully at lower numbers than we've seen, some people are going to get sick enough that they are going to need to be in hospital. Fortunately, so far, it hasn't been very many people, but some of the experts that I've talked to who've done some looking at modeling estimate that it could end up being thousands if we all end up getting COVID-19 because of this. Is the healthcare system ready to deal with this when or if it happens?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure who you talked to about modeling, but presumably that modeling would not involve any of the measures that we've already taken. And we can't forget that, we have the highest rate of vaccines across the country here. We are also pushing the boosters out, and we have over 110,000 people boosted, or around that amount, in a short period of time. We know that these work. So boosters combined with even the double vaccine, of course, is responsible for reducing hospitalizations by up to 70%, or severe symptoms up to 70% in some studies. Certainly shows that it has an even bigger impact on ICU capacity. So you're right in saying that we can't all get this at the same time, but we have put in measures that will allow us to extend the booster campaign, allow those who haven't gotten their second dose to get their second dose. But the combination, the balance is using public health measures with the best tool we have, which is the vaccines, to keep people out of hospital. And I think that we've seen that they work so far. I'm looking at our hospitalization rate right now, and again, I keep coming back to the rate of doubling that exists in Newfoundland and Labrador that is different than other jurisdictions. That shows me that the public health measures are indeed working. And once we have time then to continue with the third dose, the booster dose, and as that continues to uptick, then I think we'll be in a better place than perhaps more other jurisdictions across the country. But hospitalizations is something that we look at very carefully, and it's more than just hospitalizations, Peter. It's the people in charge of looking after people in hospitals, and that's why we've taken some of the measures that we have, and even in the last week or so.
How worried are you, though, about the uptick that we've seen in hospitalizations in other places like Ontario and Quebec, where the wave started a little bit earlier than it did here?
Yeah, certainly we're always monitoring that and trying to look at what the delay time is between new cases and hospitalizations. And to date, we've seen lower rates in Newfoundland and Labrador. And frankly, that little bit of lag time, as you suggested, a couple of weeks, has allowed us to roll out a healthier booster campaign. It's allowed us to put in more targeted, balanced public health measures along the way, incremental, adding to them as we need to. And I think the combination of those two things will hopefully put us in a good place. But we are always reevaluating this. We're always looking at the measures to see if they work and to see if there's anything else we need to do to protect the hospital capacity.
I think a lot of people have been thinking about the end game for COVID-19, and what that looks like has changed a lot.
Yeah, it certainly has.
It's changed a lot over the last 2 years. What we thought it might look like even changed over the last month or two. What do you now think the end game for this looks like?
An end game is probably a finish. There is no finish line. There will be no end game. This will be living with COVID-19. And I believe that if you look at the history of viruses in the past, influenza, for example, which is probably the best one to kind of look at, what happened was influenza came on the scene and killed very many people, and then eventually epidemiologists and virologists were able to look back historically and create a vaccine, and then try to use, knowing the rate at which it mutates, best predict a vaccine that would work for the future year, just say. So what I think is going to happen, and obviously things change, is that COVID-19 will build up a level of knowledge about COVID-19 and the way it mutates, that we will be able, scientists, medical professionals will be able to predict the best they can about how the virus will mutate. And then you will get an annual booster shot for COVID-19, just like you do for influenza.
How long do you think it's going to take, though, for the levels to come down to the point where we can go back to normal? People can get rid of the face masks, people can travel again, all those things that we've been missing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or billion-dollar question. It's certainly a global question that everybody is struggling with. And I think, in Newfoundland and Labrador, we're lucky to have done very well and lived very openly compared to some other jurisdictions around the world in the last 2 years. And we all want to get there. I want to get there. Dr. Fitzgerald wants to get there. And I do believe that as we change and as we've shown the willingness to be dynamic and flexible in our approach, that we will get there. But as to an exact date, I don't know. I certainly hope and think and believe that the spring and summer will be very different than where we are right now. And if you look at Denmark, South Africa, the UK, even, arguably happening in Ontario now, you get a steep rise, but then you get a sharp decline as well as with the cases. So, this could be a shorter period than some of the other variants that we have seen around the world, like Delta.
COVID isn't the only challenge facing Newfoundland and Labrador this year. There's lots of issues like the fiscal problems. Part 2 of my conversation with the Premier is coming up tomorrow night on Here and Now.
Welcome back. A former investment advisor from this province has been fined $1 million. Joan McCarthy has been permanently barred from working in the industry. She's been accused of taking $775,000 from the accounts of 6 elderly clients over a 13-year period from 2006 to 2019. Now, according to the Investment Industry Regulatory Organization of Canada, McCarthy declined to cooperate with its investigation and refused to provide documents or answer questions. She's also facing 24 criminal charges. You can read more about this story on our website at cbc.ca/NL. The United States is marking a grim anniversary. 1 year ago, hundreds of Donald Trump supporters stormed the Capitol building in Washington, apparently trying to prevent the confirmation of Joe Biden's election victory. They failed, but the January 6th attack led to 5 deaths and scores of injuries. Today, President Biden laid the blame for the violence squarely on his predecessor.
The former President of the United States of America has created and spread a web of lies about the 2020 election. He's done so because he values power over principle, because he sees his own interest as more important than his country's interest and America's interest.
There are a number of remembrance ceremonies in and around the U.S. Capitol. Most in attendance are Democrats, while Republicans are largely staying away. In a statement, Trump accused Biden of trying to, quote, further divide America. He also accused the current administration of inept leadership, COVID incompetence, and corrupt elections. Well, the Fifth Estate's latest investigation takes a troubling look at a violent white supremacist group called the Base. With access to secret audio tapes, it shows how the Base recruited in Canada, especially among members of the military, and how Canadian authorities failed to act on information they had. Gillian Finley explains.
Like, those guys were on a trajectory that was going to be violent. And it was. There was no question about it. I could hear them tick.
He goes by the name Tradian, an anti-fascist activist who for nearly a year and a half infiltrated the base, eventually leaving with thousands of screen grabs, video and audio recordings of more than 100 would-be recruits. Last October, base member and former Winnipeg military reservist Patrick Matthews was sentenced to 9 years in a U.S. prison after the FBI tracked him to training camps in Georgia and secretly recorded him and other base members plotting an attack in Virginia.
If you want the white race to survive, you're going to have to do your part. Derail some trains, kill some people, and poison some water supplies.
Matthews' membership in the violent neo-Nazi group was first exposed by the Winnipeg Free Press. After police detained the reservist briefly, he fled to the States. RCMP told the public it found weapons in his home, but it never revealed it also found this: a handwritten list of mass killings, locations and dates, dead and wounded, details of the shooters responsible.
Well, obviously it sets off alarm bells. It would certainly cause an additional investigation in the United States.
It should have caused additional investigation.
It would cause additional investigation in the United States.
But there was no additional investigation in Canada, admits the RCMP, even though it and this country's military now acknowledge they were warned about Matthews' extremist links months before.
No comment, ma'am. People like Matthews, perfect for this gig. Specifically his knowledge of explosives. That was considered valuable.
In his interview, a Fifth Estate exclusive, Tradian says the base prioritized military experience. And Matthews wasn't the only Canadian talking to them. The group has since been outlawed in Canada as a terrorist entity, but the hate that drove it is still very much alive and growing. Gillian Finley, CBC News, Toronto.
You can watch the Fifth Estate's full investigation, Base of Hate. That's tonight at 9:30 Island time, a half hour earlier in most parts of Labrador.
Saturday definitely is not going to be a nice day for traveling across the island. We're looking at snow and blowing snow for a good chunk of the afternoon with some pretty gusty winds. We could see gusts upwards of 100 to 120 kilometers per hour along the northeast coast. Let's take a look at what we're going to see temperature-wise through the day. We're looking at daytime highs in and around the minus single digits for most of the island, except for eastern Newfoundland, where it does look like this, the way that the low pressure system is going to track, we will likely see some temperatures above zero, which means we could see some drizzle or showers in the morning hours before turning colder as we head through the evening hours. So it may start as rain for eastern Newfoundland in the morning, but conditions will quickly deteriorate as we get through the afternoon. Now, up across Labrador, you're looking at another nice day, at least not along the strait, but anywhere else, you're looking at not too bad temperatures, not too bad forecast rather, as far as sunshine goes, but temperatures will still be pretty chilly, minus 20s as your daytime high. Once that area of low pressure moves out, we'll see a bit of a break on Sunday. However, some snow will move in, it looks like, for Labrador and parts of the west coast as well as we get into Sunday evening, and then eventually spreading further east. This one, another warm up, it looks like, will move in on Monday. But as far as temperatures go for Sunday, into the minus single digits, and then warming up for Labrador as well, minus 14 as a daytime high for Lab City. Taking a look at the next couple of days after that, there's that warm up I was talking about, another 4-degree day on Monday, so chance of some showers in there. Tuesday will dip back down to about minus 5 for St. John's and eastern Newfoundland. And for central and, well, central anyway, you'll likely hover or flirt with the 0-degree mark, maybe a degree above. And then western Newfoundland should stay on the cold side of that. So that means flurries for you even right through Tuesday, where temperatures dip back down to the minus double digits. Now for eastern Labrador, you're looking at some flurries late day Sunday into Monday with this one. And Tuesday looks nice though, minus 18. Overnight lows dipping into the minus 20s for next week. And then for western Labrador, temperature is going to be cold again the beginning of next week, especially overnight, minus 38 it looks like on Tuesday night. For Lab West. Had to share this photo. Jacqueline shared this one with us from Postville. She said it was for her sister, so I had to share it with you. Thank you so much for that. If you have any weather photos, send them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
Another beauty shot, and another one from northern Labrador. Last night we had one from Nain. Loving the shots from that part of the province. They're always so very beautiful. Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for sending that in. And that's it for Here and Now tonight. Thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. We hope you can join us again tomorrow as we head into the weekend. Good night.